Hey everybody, it's Tales from the Vault Thursday, and today's video is going to be about Dr. Bill Bass and the Body Farm in Knoxville, Tennessee. As I said, this video is going to be about Dr. Bill Bass, he was the head of forensics at the University of Tennessee, and how he created the Body Farm. But I want to give a disclosure. Your discretion is advised because some of this information it's somewhat graphic, so view it at your own discretion. Like I said, it may not be too bad to some, but some people it may be considered a little bit much. So, I have heard about the Body Farm. It was only created in the 1980s. So, when my daughter was at the University of Tennessee Medical Center, this happens to be just right beyond the employee parking lot, and you can see the woods. You can't see the facility, but you can see the woods where it's located. So, on certain days, you know, it could be a little bit odorous. Let's go ahead and get into this story. Like I said, viewer discretion should be advised. So, here we go. Like I said, I've once again got it written out quite a bit here. How 3 obscure acres became a world-class research center for the science of the deceased. Dr. Bill Bass, the University of Tennessee professor of forensics, was born in Stoughton, Virginia. He received his master's from the University of Kentucky in 1956. He completed his PhD in anthropology from the University of Pennsylvania in 1961. His research career began as an archaeologist excavating Native American grave sites in the Midwestern United States during the latter 1950s and 1960s. He worked briefly at the University of Kansas and Nebraska during this time. He was hired by the University of Tennessee in 1971 to head their anthropology department, which was in the process of being split from the history department at the time. You could say Bill Bass loved studying deceased people, but it almost didn't turn out that way. He was a graduate student studying counseling at the University of Kentucky in Lexington when a fatal traffic accident in the winter of 1954 brought him face to face with a totally new career. 2 trucks had crashed into each other, unaliving 3 people. The 2 drivers were identified, but a 3rd victim, a female passenger, was still yet to be identified. Investigators assumed the woman was the common-law wife of one of the truck drivers, or was she? Bass, who was taking an anthropology class at the time when his professor, Charles E. Snow, was called to investigate the true identity of the woman. Snow asked Bass to tag along and get some real-world experience. Apparently, the body had to be exhumed, so Bass drove Snow out to the cemetery. It wasn't the sort of neat and clean skeleton remains you would find in a classroom, Bass recalls. This one was odorous and burned. It would be the only time Bass vomited from smelling a decomposed body up close. Snow helped solve the mystery using dental and x-ray records. The woman was from Eastern Kentucky and had been missing after going off with one of the truck drivers, a longtime boyfriend. The other truck, which belonged to a large grocery store chain, had swerved into their path. Snow findings offered some consolation to the family of the deceased woman and helped give her relatives a solid legal claim for a lawsuit against the grocery chain. When Snow received his $25 fee for the case, he gave Bass $5 for driving him to the cemetery. But it wasn't the money that got Bass hooked. It was the real-life puzzles he wanted to solve. So he switched gears to anthropology. The next year, he was accepted into Harvard University anthropology program, highly regarded as the best in the country. But he turned it down to study at the University of Pennsylvania, which had the most famous bone detective in the nation, Wilton Krogman. Bass was a PhD student, married with a young son, renting an apartment outside of Philadelphia when he found himself once again in the unfortunate position of driving a professor to his destination. Krogman, it seems, had accidentally fallen down the stairs at his home, and riding into the bus to work with a hip-length cast was proven cumbersome. So Bass offered to drive the professor to and from college. What started as a few months of carpooling turned into a 2.5-year friendship with the world's most knowledgeable bone experts. Bass only took a single course from Krogman, but all of those rides in the carpool proved to be lifetimes worth of insight into forensic anthropology. Bass first got his idea for what would eventually become the Body Farm while he was at the University of Kansas in the 1960s, and asked if it was possible to determine the time of passing of a partially decomposed cow. He determined that additional research was needed for this and suggested that this could be accomplished by allowing a deceased cow to decompose in a field while studying the process. While this experiment was never conducted, Bass further realized that additional research of human decomposition was needed. After he was summoned in December 1977 to examine what was initially assumed to be a recent unaliving victim that had been buried on top of the grave of a Confederate soldier in Franklin, Tennessee, who had lost his life at the Battle of Nashville in 1864. Due to the fact that the body was relatively intact and still contained most of its flesh, he initially estimated that the body had been deceased for less than 1 year. But examination of the victim's clothing determined that the body was that of a Civil War soldier buried in the grave. Grave robbers had punctured the cast-iron coffin, which was airtight and largely prevented decomposition. Had removed the body, then reburied it on top of the coffin. It was determined the soldier was Lieutenant William Shy. When further evidence became known, Bass realized the unalived victim was actually expertly embalmed, well preserved in a sealed cast-iron casket. From his experience, Bass recognized that forensic anthropologists needed to know a lot more about the decomposition process. After being hired by the University of Tennessee in 1971 to head their anthropology department, the concept of the Body Farm started. Dr. Bill Bass needed a place to keep deceased bodies. Police and medical examiners across Tennessee started calling on the forensic anthropologists to help them figure out how long some people had been deceased. The genial Bass would happily take a look at a body, but he had no place to place it. After placing a deceased man from Clarksville, Tennessee in a restroom near his office beneath Neyland Stadium on the University of Tennessee campus in Knoxville, Bass got such a chewing out from an unhappy janitor that he knew things had to change. He went to the dean at UT. "I said, 'Dean, I need some land to put deceased bodies on,' Bass said." From the macabre request, Bass and the UT scientists and students who have followed him created an internationally recognized Center for the Study of Decomposition of Human Body in 1981. The very first version of the Body Farm today, formerly called the Forensic Anthropology Facility, actually started in a sow barn on a farm where UT used to raise pigs near the conflux of the Holston and French Broad rivers. When Bass made the call in 1971 to the dean, that's what he ended up with. But it couldn't accommodate the growing demand of space as the U.S. Department of Anthropology chief pursued a very basic question about which not so much was known. How does a body decay, and what are the factors which influence that? By 1981, the Body Farm would find a more established home in the woods and shrubs behind the University of Tennessee Medical Center, near employee parking, above Fort Loudon Lake, where it remains today. Nobody had done this before, Bass recalled. It was the first facility of its kind in the world. With the help of the students, Bass built a little building. They had no budget to speak of, he said. To the local press, Bass kindly asked reporters not to announce where the land was located. He didn't want to attract curiosity seekers. At first, they operated without a fence, but eventually realized that could not go on considering what they were doing. Bass recalled the posted biohazard signs around to warn people about getting too close. The signs often disappeared, likely ending up in many a UT dorm Fearful of dogs and coyotes that might carry off human remains, they put bodies in protective cages. The facility itself was quite small, said Lee Meadows Jantz, a FAC Associate Director who has been at UT since 1985. They had some burials outside the cage that they did the original buried body study zone, but that was really it. There were far more forensic cases than body donations. Using human cadavers to study decomposition was a new concept in 1981, as a standard practice was to use pig cadavers as an analog to humans in decomposition. Pigs and humans share many attributes, including body mass, range, anatomy, and hair coverage. Pigs are widely available, so researchers can control traits and the cause of demise. However, pigs fall short of a perfect analog concerning body proportions, stomach anatomy, and diet. Recent studies have shown that pig cadavers decompose at a higher rate compared with human cadavers. Pig studies allowed researchers to know and understand the steps of decomposition. Researchers were initially reluctant to use human cadavers in decomposition studies because of several confounding factors. Unlike pigs, for human cadavers, researchers cannot control variables such as age, weight. Most donated human cadavers passed from natural causes, so the elderly make up a huge portion of the available cadavers. Humans also have dissimilar body chemistry thanks to factors such as diet and pharmaceutical use. Lastly, human cadavers may have been autopsied or frozen before arrival at the facility. Even with these limitations, it is still important to use human cadavers to understand how the human body decomposes. The primary focus of the body farm is forensic taphonomy, which covers everything that happens to a body from passing to discovery. Taphonomists observe how the human body decomposes in a controlled environment by studying the body itself as well as the impact the body has on its surroundings. At any given time, dozens of cadavers rest on or in the 3 or so hilly acres. Experimenters test hypotheses on the science of passing. Law officers learn the basics of decay. Prosecutors from outside the United States study the phenomenon of mass graves and take what they have learned back to their home countries. And people, instead of spending eternity in an urn or coffin, become willing testing clues in the name of science. Then they began to watch what happened. As the bodies sat outside in the weather and the blowflies smelled opportunity. It may make some squeamish, but one of the body farm's contributions to forensic science has been understanding better how blowflies invade a body and what they can tell investigators about the time of passing. Flies move very quickly once they detect a body in the elements. They look for cavity openings, the nose, the eyes, and other openings to lay their eggs. Maggots soon hatch and thrive, feasting on what's under a person's flesh. By measuring the stage of insect invasion on a body, Bass could determine how long someone had been left outside and in passing. It helped police answer the question they had for Bass all those years ago when he first got into forensic work: just how long a person has been deceased. More than 5,000 people have pre-registered to donate their bodies when they pass. Director Donnie Stedman said in the Forensic Anthropology Center, which includes the body farm, really gets to shine when researchers can tackle broad topics that cross multiple fields of study. The interesting questions are the ones that go beyond any one discipline, Stedman said. For all the grant proposals we have written, we've always included DNA, so soil sciences, chemistry, and other sorts of disciplines, and really brought people together to think deeply about forensic science and its application to criminal justice problems. I think that's something the Forensic Anthropology Center does really well, is bringing people together to look at those big problems. From Bass's big ideas have sprung generations of forensic anthropologists who now teach and research across the United States and beyond. Because of his initial interest, police now have a better idea how to investigate homicides and deceased bodies. Years of studying deceased bodies have taught students at the body farm what animals will move in to consume or occupy a body, the cleverness of predators that come to consume flesh, how a body reacts when left in the winter versus what happens when left in the summer, the hundreds of chemical compounds emitted as a body decays, and the airborne signature they leave behind. How the chemicals and medicines a person ingests in life can affect the way they decay in passing. How bodies change when buried at various levels under concrete as seen through ground-piercing radar, and many other areas of interest. Some of the conditions students study were situations such as a body being locked in a trunk of a car or being submerged underwater. Over 100 bodies are donated every year. Some people pre-register before their passing, and others are donated by their families or a medical examiner. 60% are made up of family members of individuals who are not pre-registered with the facility. Over 1,300 people choose to pre-register themselves. Perhaps the most famous person to donate his body for study was the anthropologist Grover Krantz, as described by his colleague David Hunt at the Smithsonian. The experiments go on today and will almost certainly continue in the future, exploring questions that haven't even been imagined yet. To Bass, the project remained an obscure research facility until writer Patricia Cornwell came along in 1994, and she wrote a Kay Scarpatia forensic mystery called The Body Farm that features briefly the Knoxville operation. Practically overnight, the nation at large learned about the fascinating, if a little off-putting, center of study. The Body Farm became a pop culture star. Today, there are a handful of human decomposition facilities in the United States, including in Florida and Texas. The Body Farm at Texas State University at San Marcos is billed as the world's largest, much bigger than UT Knoxville. While the original forensics research grounds remained in operation, UT has added the William M. Bass Forensic Anthropology Building on the site. It includes a classroom, an intake room to receive bodies, and a laboratory. When the center has finished research involving a donor's remains, that person's bones are brought to the anthropology building for processing. Then they are numbered and cataloged, then stored in a massive collection of skeletal remains at UT campus. UT is what is billed as the largest modern collection of skeletons in the country. There are 8 facilities in the United States and are located at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, Western Carolina University, Chilowee, North Carolina, Texas State University, San Marcos, Texas. The director is a former student of Bill Bass. Sam Houston University, Southeast Texas. Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, Illinois. Colorado Mesa University, Grand Junction, Colorado. University of South Florida, Tampa, Florida. And George Mason University, Prince William County. Similar facilities are operational in Australia and Canada. In the United Kingdom, research has focused on non-human remains, mainly pigs, due to their similarity to humans. A book called Unaliving Acres, that's not the real name, but Unaliving Acres, is about Dr. Bill Bass's life and career, co-written with journalist John Jefferson. Bass formerly retired in 1999 after heading UT's Department of Anthropology for nearly 3 decades as a UT professor emeritus. But he's hardly stopped working. The Stoughton, Virginia native who lives in West Knoxville has co-written with John Jefferson under the name Jefferson Bass some 15 books or more, highlighting his field of interest. Some are nonfiction, some are fiction, involving a forensic scientist named Bill Brockton. Some of the titles are Carved in Bone, Flesh and Bone, The Devil's Bones, Bones of Betrayal, The Bone Thief, The Boneyard, The Inquisitor's Key, Cut to the Bone, and Breaking Point. Dr. Bass's influence is profound in the advancement of forensic anthropology, colleagues said. None of what exists today at UT would be here if it weren't for Bass, said Giovanni Vidoli, FAC Associate Director. This program is built in large part on his legacy. We have, of course, moved forward from that. As you have noticed, it's all women who are senior members of the Anthropology Center. The program has grown. Training has grown. The Body Farm was started by one man. Today, 5 women lead the FAC, a reflection of perhaps of strong interest among women in anthropology and the forensic sciences. Donnie Wolf Stedman, director of UT's Forensic Anthropology Center, said, "Contrary to popular belief, bodies were never stored beneath the gridiron at Neyland Stadium. However, hundreds of skeletons of individuals were stored in the East Stadium Hall within the east side of the stadium at one time." Bass said he is most proud of the students and scholarships that have emerged from the program itself. "I have had really great graduate students who have done very, very well. 5 of my doctoral students work at the Smithsonian. You can't get much better than the Smithsonian for research. I hate to say it, but I'm one of the first to teach students in human identification, and they have done well. When analysis is finished, the remains may be returned to the family of the deceased for burial. If requested, otherwise, it will remain in the department's collection of bones." Dr. Bill Bass spent time on an unsolved case that dated back to 1975. A 9-year-old Girl Scout was out selling cookies and didn't return home. 33 days later, a search party found her deceased in a garage. An investigation failed to turn up a suspect, so the case went cold. And then, in 2002, one of the detectives sent in some DNA samples from the original crime scene, and the results flagged a prison inmate who had just been released. The inmate was picked up and charged with a crime, but another matter still remained. Years back, during the search for the missing girl, police had looked in the very building where she was found, but initially didn't find the body. All these years later, authorities wanted to settle the case to see if the girl had been deceased in the garage all alone. Looking over the autopsy report and photos of the crime scene, Bass found that the girl had indeed been deceased for 33 days. She had been in the same spot all the time. Lividity had been fixed from her time of passing. She hadn't been moved. He has investigated multiple high-profile cases, including 1983 Benton fireworks disaster, the Tri-State crematory scandal, and the 2007 exhumation and autopsy of the Big Bopper, in which he determined the cause of demise, which had not been confirmed initially. He also worked on the Lindbergh baby case. With all the cases he's helped solve, you would think Bass would be content to ease into retirement and gladly pass on the mantle to another gifted mind. But there are those 8 to 10 skeletal remains sitting in the back of his office under Neyland Stadium that haunt him. Remains of young women found along interstates no one has been able to identify. Deductive reasoning suggests they were prostitutes unalived and dumped along the side of the interstates, only to be found months later by mowers cutting grass. DNA proves useless if the family of this estranged woman doesn't know she's missing and hasn't entered her into a database system for law enforcement to check. So the cold case stays cold. What Bass has done for forensic anthropology locally, I don't know if people have truly recognized what we have. That Bass is here and the legacy that lives on through anthropology across the United States, the teaching. I don't know if we realize that, but it's a pretty awesome thing for Knoxville, said Special Agent Brandon Elkins, an admitted fan of Bass and that what goes on at the body farm. So, that is the story of the body farm. Look at how it got started and how it got the ball rolling for many other forensic anthropology centers across the country and even in different parts of the world. All because of one man at the University of Tennessee. And during my research, I found out that a lot of FBI agents would come to the body farm and do research as well and do studies and learn how to recognize signs and different things to learn when someone had passed. So I found this very interesting. I hope you all did as well. So leave me comments below about what you think. Like I said, viewer discretion is advised. So until next time, I'll see you on the flip side. Don't forget to like, to subscribe, to hit that notification button, and to share my video. See ya. Bye.